Hello and welcome everyone, I'm C.S.Gilmore, and today I'm going to talk to you about the book Hallowed Ground. It's an Age of Sigmar book. Once again, it's these two witch hunters, and by Richard Strachan. Uh, Galen and Dorelia Vandens. And this is set before the Temple of Silence book we talked about last week. And I realized I made a couple mistakes in referencing to this book. I was thinking this was one that was set after another book, but this is actually the book I was thinking. And I realized why I was getting mixed up is because it kind of has a few references to a couple different time periods throughout this book, and my brain was thinking it was two separate stories. It's actually just one. I also made a slight mistake in regards to a few other details, but we'll get into that. For a moderately minor mistake, I believe. So there's a city of Excelsis, and so big city. It's got all sorts of stuff there. It's got dwarves. It's got people. It's got various guilds. It's got a wizard tower. It's got some Stormcast Eternals, which are Sigmar's things. Think the fantasy equivalent of Space Marines, except for when they die, they get shot up back into wherever the realm of Sigmar via lightning and can be reforged into a new suit of armor because they're essentially souls that have been bound to a suit of armor. Some of them, I can't remember if they all still have a physical form or not. I think some of them, I don't know. After they get reforged so many times, they start losing their humanity and their memories, so it gets complicated. And I'm not quite sure how stable some of the lore in regards to them is at times. But yeah, so they're immortal warriors of a sort. Well, not quite immortal. They can't die. It's just that when they die, they go back to Realm of Sigmar and have to get reforged. Complicated stuff. This is what happens when you have multiple gods running the show. Anyhow, let me get you a better look at this book here. There we go. Hallowed Ground. There we go. That's probably the best lighting. So this starts off right after a siege. Excelsis has just undergone a massive siege. Shoot, I forgot the guy's name. They're big character in the fantasy setting. I'm not as familiar with, but big monster character was involved in the siege on the city. So you had, and they were getting attacked by like everything: giants, ogres, orcs, various other creatures. Yeah, lots of stuff was involved there, and generally it's some of the elves and dwarves and humans, mostly dwarves and humans, working together. The elves are kind of a little iffy sometimes, depending on what time setting you go with and whatnot. Yeah. But anyway, elves, dwarves, and humans usually one side. Orcs and various other creatures tend to be on the other, along with some of the elves. And though they don't talk about it much, sometimes some of the dwarves, though not nearly as many. Alright, so let me get this stationed there a little better. There's my neck. Okay. But this starts off right after that siege, and Dorelia is trying to find her father, who has head off into the wilderness on his own, without explaining why. And we find out that the reason for this... Please stop shaking everything. Good boy. And we find out that the reason for this is that he's caught the trail of a specific vampire. And I believe I mentioned last time that I was thinking it was her mother, but it wasn't the case. It was uh, her mother is dead, as far as I know, at the point in this story. What he's chasing, the vampire he's chasing, is Morgaine, I believe was the name, and she is the vampire that killed his wife, her mother, and then had reanimated her. And Dorelia, as a little girl, had to kill her mother after she had been reanimated as an undead. Because sometimes vampires like to toy with their food, and messing with them psychologically is fun for some vampires. So yeah. So Galen's gone off after this vampire for revenge. Not necessarily just because, hey, it's a vampire and it's my job to hunt them, but because, he really wants revenge because they killed his wife. And, not too happy about that. They have a whole thing here during their chase after Galen, they and everything, and a few other details involved. I forget if it was before they find Galen or right after. They end up finding a guy who's pretending to be one of them, who's pretending to be one of these agents of Azir in a village, and they kind of work it out with him and essentially force him to come along with them. They also go out into these towns, off trying to find this vampire, and they end up, finding a bunch of undead because vampires can generally raise undead, like zombies, that sort of deal. And they actually do capture the vampire, as I recall, but that's only part of the story because they don't kill her just yet. Because they find out that the reason she's traveling the way she is because she's getting out of the way of something else. There's a necromancer, a wizard who specializes in some dark magics, as you might imagine, who is preparing to take advantage of the fact that Excelsis has just had a major siege battle, and thus has a whole lot of corpses of various types lying around, to raise up an army of his own and take the city. And this necromancer, if I remember right, was an interesting character, bit on the crazy side. I recall his motivation was he was trying to bring back his daughter. Or was it his son? Anyway, child. Trying to bring back his child. Who he has animated, reanimated after their death. But he's ultimately trying to, really bring them back. Not just as a corpse he's controlling to an extent, but rather like he's trying to really bring them back, and for that he needs more power. And this city has this massive source of power. It's like a floating nexus. How to describe it? I'm not sure. I don't know enough about it to describe it properly, but it's like a floating. I think it's kind of like a nexus crystal tower deal. Serves as Wizard's headquarters, but also it's like linked to a ley line and all sorts of stuff. Lots of magic, and he intends to take it. And so they find out about this, and they actually basically recruit the vampire unwillingly to help them hunt down and deal with this bigger threat. And they go back to the city. They are trying to find out what's going on. Who is this necromancer, and where is he? Because they don't know who he is exactly. But they're hunting for him, and unfortunately, they don't find him in time to prevent him from doing what he wanted to do. and that is he animates a whole army of everything. So the city is already beat up. It should be noted. Like, the city's already not in the best of shape because it's just undergone siege. And it's just fought off that siege. Like, they haven't had time to properly bury the bodies. They've just got mass graves lying all over the place. Where they've been collecting the bodies and just to keep them away from out of the city and whatnot. So they're not looking great when this necromancer is apparently an extremely powerful necromancer and also a bit of a genius in how to work some of those magics. He goes and he animates all of these orcs, giants, etc., and so forth that were attacking the city, reanimates them, along with all the dead defenders from that siege. Reanimates them. Old graveyard in the middle of town, reanimates them. So they've got zombies and various undead galore coming in from everywhere. Siege is back on. And so you've got all these people, various sea militia, the witch hunters get back and they're working with the vampire out of necessity here to try to hunt down this necromancer and stop him. And it's really interesting because the vampire um, actually has some issues with him being powerful enough to influence her at times, if I remember right, and she's not too keen on that, which is part of the reason she wants him dead as well, because vampires, not good, very evil, undead. They kind of take it personally when you can actually tell them what to do. So yeah, they have all sorts of things with them fighting, trying to hunt down this necromancer, but unfortunately, he mostly almost succeeds at his plans. Drelia and Galen actually get separated. Galen mostly helping with the defense of the city, holding the defenders together, leading them and whatnot. While Drelia goes after the necromancer himself. And there's tons of fights, lots of action in this book. And it's well done. Plus, but they also have some downtime to balance it out, where they're talking about things. Galen regretting, mentions regretting that he got his daughter involved in the order. I think I mentioned that in the last book as well. But partly because how he got her involved in the order was, her mother getting murdered and her having to shoot her mother with a special crossbow to put her down again. Yeah. Dorelli is really good with a crossbow, by the way. Lots of practice with it, and she has these special arrowheads. I think they call them nullstone arrowheads. Special arrowheads that have some magical powers that help them disrupt the weave of magic that tends to hold undead together. So very anti-undead arrows. Anyway, they have a massive drawn-out fight. Things don't go great for a lot of them. Like, there's people dying left and right. They're barely holding on themselves. Galen, if I remember, gets pretty seriously injured. Dorelia, I think, even builds up some injuries. And the necromancer manages to get up into the floating tower. Dorelia has to get up there. I believe she manages it by uh, I believe she gets hold of some of the dwarven airships. Dwarves have airships in the fantasy setting. Well, some of them do anyway. Pretty cool stuff. Some of the dwarves are very steampunky at times. And it gets very fun times. Yeah, the Caradron Overlords is that particular faction of the dwarves. They tend to do flying machines and trading, maybe a bit of piracy-ish type stuff. Oh, anyway. Let me think if there's a major points here I wanted to cover. It's not the longest book. It was only like 300 something pages, and it's fairly large text. Okay, it doesn't look like that on the camera, I know, but lot of space between the text, not tiny little text. So all in all, it wasn't the longest of books, but it was well written and it went through quite a lot. Yeah, at one point they end up having to have a bit of a fight. I believe Dorelli ended up fighting with the vampire. Um, Even though they were working together to try to stop the necromancer influences the vampire and actually makes them have to fight each other. Uh, and there's all sorts of stuff there. They eventually do prevent the necromancer from winning. They also actually capture the vampire, and I believe they kill her afterwards because yeah, cool, we worked together, allies for a while, of necessity. They're still not letting that go though. The Order of Azir is not known for just letting someone go after that sort of deal, especially not a vampire, and especially those two with the whole revenge for the wife mother killing. Long-standing family feud issue there, or family grudge. How what would be the proper reference there? Huh. Let me see here. Yeah, and like yeah, right at the end they burn the vampire because it's one of the ways it's best for dealing with vampires is to incinerate them. Da, da, da. And yeah, this vampire after the story is very much like guaranteed dead. I'm pretty sure Galen and Dorelli basically sit there and watch and make sure death confirmed, and they're good about making sure death is confirmed in this sort of case. They know what to look for. And then they hint at future adventures, some Nullstone Brotherhood that might be in the sewers that they need to go check out. Because if you work for the Order of Azir, if you're a witch hunter like this, your work is never done. Never done. Just like being Inquisitor in Warhammer 40k, you've got something to do. No matter what. There's always some rumor to hunt down and confirm whether it's true or not, or what the part of it is true. There's always some chaos cult. There's always some undead, some monstrosity from beyond reality, some monstrosity from reality. Because Age of Sigmar has some pretty weird critters at times. But this one particularly, undead, is a big thing. That's a good summation of the story, more or less. I skipped over a lot of pieces. I forget exactly what happens to the one guy that was pretending to be one of them. I know they drag him along with them for a while, and I think he was involved in the defense of the city, but I can't remember for sure. Don't remember what happens to him in the long run, but I believe he... I want to say he lives. Could be wrong. I don't remember where to check exactly on where his story coverage ends. Anyway, but I think that covers the main story elements. All in all, it was a fun read. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it. I'd actually probably recommend it before Temple of Silence because you get a lot more of the background of the characters in this book. Though Temple of Silence you could still read on its own. The characters you get a good bit of build of. There's lots of action to keep things moving around and keep them going, but there you also get the how they're human and how they're coping with things and injuries and age and being vastly outnumbered by your enemies, having to fight smart rather than brute force because there's not enough brute force in any of them. In fact, they have some issues at some points where they mentioned during the attack that like so the Stormcast Eternals, like big soldiers, they don't really get tired out in the same way as most people do and whatnot, are fighting, but even they can't hold their ground because they're just being swarmed by so many undead. And some of them are getting cut down and sent back to be reforged and whatnot, and that's going to take them a while to respawn, basically. And yeah, there's all sorts of things. You got people having to. You got some of the guilds with some of the humans and dwarves having to fire off cannons inside the city to try to hold streets, barricades all over the place. The combat was actually really well done, as I recall. And it was fun to see the interactions between them, the main characters, and like the vampire. They really want to kill the vampire. You can't trust the vampire as far as you can throw them. The vampire really doesn't necessarily want to work with them either, but it's that whole enemy of my enemy situation, kind of needs must. And it has that satisfactory ending of, yeah, the bad guys all get it. I think they killed the necromancer at the end. I can't remember for sure if he escapes, but did he escape or did he get killed? I can't remember. I'm pretty sure he dies because if he didn't die, there was no way they would have. I think it was they had to kill him because that was the only way to stop the siege, since all the undead are being animated by his power. So they had to kill the necromancer in order to stop all the undead, because otherwise the siege was going down one way or the other. But he very nearly wins. He comes extremely close to actually tapping into and altering the power flowing from the super mage tower temple nexus. And yeah, there's and like basically super amping his powers. There's so many interesting things that happen in this book. Highly recommend it. But I think that's all I can cover for this one right now. I would say, like I said, check it out, read it for yourself. I think you'd enjoy it, especially if you like that kind of thing with the witch hunters and the fantasy setting, and you want to see a mix of it. This one really did a good job of addressing various races and like the dwarves being involved there, and how the wizards and the stormcast, and basically how all these different factions in the game play actually like live and work together. And that was it was well done. But I'm gonna end this here. So yeah, comments below. Have you read the book? What did you think about it? Anything important I forgot? Favorite parts? Least favorite parts? Issues you had with the book? Maybe. Comments below. Let's just talk. Let's talk. Otherwise, hit like, hit subscribe to keep up with new releases if you haven't done so already. And thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great night. Bye.